in the Indian context, we haven't been told so much to talk about money.
Right.
We did not have that much freedom to talk about money with our parents maybe. How do you typically come across and handle these difficult situations? Because I'm very sure that once this kind of a data comes on the table, there will be a chaos. So how do you navigate through that?
There is inevitably a difference in what one partner thinks versus what the other partner thinks. Right? I think it is very important to make both the partners feel comfortable. It should not appear as you're preferring one's view over the other.
As a couple, we always have to work like a team.
Yeah, absolutely.
But by working with the team, I'm very sure if we just double click on that, the biggest thing is the communication. Right?
Yeah.
How do you make sure that there's a clarity? There's a common goal which the couple has to go towards. When should a couple like us actually look out for a good financial advisor? And is there some criteria that you have?
So see, I think
Hello everyone, welcome to Spring Money's channel, where we have very honest conversations about financial life of you, your family, and your partners. Today we actually have a very special guest, Rahul, who is a founder of Advent Financials, and he has carved out a very speciality into his practice of helping the couples to navigate through their financial lives. So welcome Rahul. And yes, hi sir.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I think, as I said, you have genuinely carved out and you are heavily focused on making the life of the two people, the couples especially, go through that entire journey of their life and especially focusing on their finances. So tell us about that a bit.
Right. So I think, Nikhil, very early on in my career, I noticed a pattern. Right? I mean, I had these successful couples who were doing very well for themselves in their respective careers, and through my work closely in building the financial plan. But somehow that plan just never worked. It would, inevitably get derailed, right? And this was because of their personal relationship dynamics. Somehow they just weren't on the same page. And I think that's when I realized that for a financial plan to be truly successful, right? The conversation had to move beyond the numbers and just beyond investment, right? It had to be what I call a financial life plan. And when we talk about couples, right, that life is a shared one. So the strength that a couple has is basically they can leverage the finances, that unified thing. But at the same time, the weakness which kind of goes against them is the discord, right? That can be detrimental to building long-term wealth. So I think that's when I felt that I should work more towards being more than just a financial advisor to clients, right? Be their sounding board, be their thinking partner, and help them build plans that are closely aligned to what really matters for them, and not just about investments. Yeah. So,
No, I think it's beautifully said. As you rightly said, as a couple, we always have to work like a team.
yeah, absolutely.
But by working with the team, I'm very sure if we just double click on that, the biggest thing is the communication.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
How do you make sure that there's a clarity, there's a common goal which the couple has to go towards? And I'm very sure you would have come across a lot of such conversations where you have to bring them together and do that. So, what's your experience into this regard, especially?
So I think very well put, because this is actually very common, right? There is inevitably a difference in what one partner thinks versus what the other partner thinks, right? And there are these conflicts, right? I think when any advisor is kind of engaging with a couple, and you also said it, communication is important. I think it is very important to make both the partners feel comfortable. It should not appear as you're preferring one's view over the other, right? So maintaining that respect and priority for each one's views becomes very important. And then you set boundaries, right? I mean, you set the rules for the communication. So maybe, you tell the husband that, please don't interrupt me while you're speaking. Let her complete what she wants to say, right? And then probably at the end. So that would also give her the space to express herself. Maybe you'll also get to the other perspective that you might not be aware of, right? So I think that's how you basically navigate through it. And when you have these slightly more nuanced conversations, instead of it being a flashpoint, those differences, each person actually recognizes and understands that what is the real reason, right? And probably they themselves will be able to find that middle path.
Oh, I think again nicely put, Matlab, I think it is beautifully said that everybody has to have a place to put their opinion.
Absolutely.
Because I think every marriage that is a
Yeah.
co-cornerstone,
Yeah.
and especially when in a financial situation, I'm very sure it would be. But I think again to just slightly go deeper into this, in the Indian context, we haven't been told so much to talk about money.
Right.
Again, we did not have that much freedom to talk about money with our parents maybe. And the same goes typically with the couples also, because either it is frowned upon, considered a taboo, or there is kind of infidelity also, wherein some of the things that a husband has done personally, which are not known to the wife, or even with the case of any spouse, I would say. How do you typically come across and handle these difficult situations? Because I am very sure that once this kind of a data comes onto the table, there will be a chaos. So how do you navigate through that?
Right. So I think the key is basically probably see firstly I think we all grow up with certain baggage, right? I think there is a person by the name of Dr. Brad Clotz who's done a lot of work in this area, right? And it speaks about the kind of unconscious or subconscious lessons that we imbibe from our environment, from our parents, seeing how our parents kind of dealt with money, etc. And there are these money scripts, as he calls them, which we kind of have internalized. So it could be something like money is the cause of all evil, right? Poor people should not deserve money if they cannot put hard work. These kind of things, right? And these basically then, how do I put this? Yeah, so these basically impact the way we go about making these financial decisions, right? So I think if you realize, so there is a certain amount of hesitation and a sense of shame that we feel, right? I mean, when we're talking, we're not comfortable talking about it because we have this fear of being judged. So I think as an advisor or even if the couples are talking among themselves, if they can create this neutral, non-judgmental space wherein each one listens to the other without any judgment, I think all these issues around infidelity and money being a taboo, I think these would largely be eliminated because you feel comfortable. You know that you're not going to be judged. You will not come across as being stupid, right? Not lambasted for making that one-off purchase of that shiny new gadget, right? So I think it's that it's essentially about purposeful and mindful listening to each other without any judgment and without attaching any shame. So I think that's it.
Oh, I think again very bright point that you just picked up, which is that both the people, especially in a couple relationship, might have completely different money personalities.
Absolutely.
Or they might have different habits.
Absolutely.
Maybe because of the childhood, maybe because of the upbringing.
Absolutely.
I'm very sure if a wife goes for a heavy sari,
Yeah.
okay, in that context, husband will be thinking, "Yaar, kyun lena hai ye matlab?"
Absolutely. Yeah. Same.
And at the same time, if husband goes for a SUV, wife will be thinking, "Kyun chahiye yaar, matlab auto se chale jayenge."
Absolutely.
And but I'm sure, as you rightly said, if there is a good communication and a platform where these things can be sorted out, and both of them can arrive at a common goal as partnership, definitely these things can be sorted. But I'm very sure you would have seen multiple such money personalities or different habits.
Yeah.
But what would you advise to couples who are typically going through, at least in the initial years of their marriage, and what do you advise to them?
So I think again, I'm just to the point. I just want to add an example so that the viewers can understand, appreciate this better, right? So we talk about this money split. So let's say the wife has grown up in a household with a very stable income, right? So for her, there was spending money was never a consideration as such, right? Whereas the husband might have grown up in a household with unstable income. Money was always short, and you had to prioritize needs over the wants, right? And so therefore, if I call, let's say, the wife as the spender, for the lack of a better term, and the husband as a saver manager, right? So I think the couple can have a communication with themselves and see each other's point of view, that background. You probably understand that the husband is not being a miser, right? There's a sense of a fear of financial insecurity, right? And he's trying to protect the family from financial chaos, right? And at the same time, the husband can appreciate that she's come from this kind of family. So I think this kind of nuanced conversation, honest, open conversation is there among the couple. I think a lot of issues take care of themselves.
No, I think again same thing. When you start conversing,
Yeah.
as I think every marriage counselor also says,
Yeah.
when you start conversing, most of the problems are very small problems.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm very sure with money also, those are the things. But once you understand the backgrounds, I think the appreciation towards the partner is lot more.
Absolutely. Yes.
I think now coming to the step-by-step execution of this,
Right.
I think definitely we understand the theory, but I'm coming from more from a married person and as a viewer,
Right.
how do I do it, right? This is all fantastic when you tell it, but I think how do I go across this communication and how do you facilitate this communication?
Right.
What should I do? I think what would be your advice on that?
Right. So it might sound that I'm trying to sell myself, but I think the ideal starting point would be that you kind of engage an advisor who can act as an expert facilitator, right? And you also have this impartial person who is facilitating the conversation and this exercises to you, right? However, I mean, that's not the path that you want to go down. And I think today, I mean, we have a lot of online resources that people can have access to, and then they can use those tools. I think the key ultimately is about having an open conversation, right? That solves, I mean, as you yourself said, that solves most of the problems. But having, yes, coming back to the point, having an advisor does help because you have that unbiased, objective person being in the middle. And who can call out, let's say, if one person is trying to dominate the conversation.
I think rightly said, but again, I want to be a very practical and I want to seek all that I can get today.
Right.
What would be that one thing, or how many times should I have these kind of conversations? Is there some benchmark that you can suggest to our audience? Should it be daily, which will be very difficult to do? Should it be monthly? Should it be weekly? Should it be yearly? It might be long term. And what should be the conversation about?
Right.
Because that is also a very critical factor, which I am very sure the audiences and me personally also would love to know.
Sure. So I think to make it sound a bit more interesting for the audience, right? I mean, you could have the financial equivalent of a date night, right?
Okay, fantastic.
So you basically kind of consciously put that in your calendar, right? And it is important to put that on your calendar. I mean, it should not be a sharp date night. It should be a non-negotiable appointment that you have to make. It should be like an appointment with the doctor, right? So I think depending on what stage each couple is, right? I mean, if they have had money conversation in the past, or if they're starting afresh. I think if you're starting absolutely afresh, the key would be to keep the initial meeting very, very light, right? And just openly discuss what's on my mind, right? Hey, I'm feeling a bit unsecure, right? We have this huge EMI that we're paying on a monthly basis. I mean, are we saving enough for, let's say, our retirement, right? So these kind of things, just lay out all on the floor whatever concerns or thought processes are going. I think that itself is a very cathartic experience for both partners. For someone who is more evolved, I think you can have a slightly more nuanced conversation about a more vision kind of a thing. That what do we want our life to look like, right? What are the things that we both want individually and jointly, right? So I think those are the kind of conversations that you can have. And possibly, I think taking this a step further, you can then, for that matter, in terms of the frequency you ask the question, right? So I think to each one their own, right? Whatever frequency that they come with, it should not become an overwhelming thing, right? Because if you make it too frequent, then you tend to put it off. But if you have a well thought out intentional meeting, time carved out for this, I think there's greater chances of you basically honoring that and following up on that.
No, definitely. I think it will also depend on what are the life events
Absolutely
that might be happening.
Absolutely.
And because somebody is getting married or somebody is having maybe a child coming up, maybe somebody is switching the jobs. So I'm very sure at least critical junctions, or somebody is thinking of retirement, maybe at the 50 that I want to have early retirement. I'm very sure at least at these junctions where there's a big life event that is changing, you need to have this kind of a money.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nikhil, for bringing that up. And I think it's a very, very valid point, right? Because these things tend to get unsaid, right? And it just kind of keeps simmering underneath. And I don't have the data for India, but worldwide, I think money is one of the prime reasons for divorce.
Oh,
right? And I think that is, one is the mental incompatibility, right, or could be the physical incompatibility, but there is also financial incompatibility. I think it's become very important that you have this open, honest conversation. You're going to spend the rest of your lives together. And money is such an important aspect of our lives. And whether we like to believe it or not, each and every decision that we make in our lives ultimately is directly or indirectly a money decision. Money plays a role. So yeah.
I think beautifully you said that ultimately money is important part of our life, and I think it deserves a due respect.
Absolutely.
So start having those conversations. That is the first step, at least, towards having the openness, towards not neglecting that aspect, but actually embracing that aspect, embracing that maybe ambiguity. But then you have an advisor. You go to the advisor, ask them the questions, and definitely. But I think moving on slightly, once we establish that yes, I need to have a conversation. But what are some practical tips that, because see, money, again, when a common man thinks, they think in terms of accounts, they think in terms of balances, they think in terms of investment, they think in terms of maybe I want to have an experience. Okay? So, what are some practical thoughts that should I maintain different accounts? Should I just keep one account as couples both so that I have that transparency and that sort? How should I go about these things?
Okay. I'll attempt to answer this in two parts so as to like cover the spectrum. So, I mean, there could be one situation wherein both the couples are largely earning similar, and another very important aspect is that wherein one person could be earning more than the other partner, right? And I think in a marriage, because it's a partnership, right, money should not become the distinction. Right? So, what you can follow is something that I call like you have a yours, right, ours,
Okay.
and in a mine account, right? So the common pool, right, is ours, right? That is where the both partners contribute, and it goes towards the shared goals and then your household expenses, etc. And then it is pre-decided between both the partners that okay, this is the amount that I'm going to withdraw, right? And I can spend it the way I like. So that also kind of gives you the freedom. Otherwise, I mean, there will be that you mentioned infidelity, financial infidelity in the earlier question. So I think that is where it kind of comes from, right? And you should not have feel that sense of shame or feel judged that okay, why did I spend? You should have that freedom, right? So yeah, I think that is important.
Definitely, I think it's a fantastic point. Right? All of us need to balance that freedom and some constraints. Because otherwise, you can go either way, which is also too cumbersome. But I think going more towards slightly deeper into this conversation, let's say I have this philosophy of the accounts, different accounts, and there is ours account also, wherein me and my wife are putting the money. But definitely there are some common goals. Okay? And how do you typically help your clients or help the couples to navigate and get clarity around those common goals? Because I'm very sure, and you also mentioned, there is income inequality. So, wherein I'm very sure there will be conversations about, let's say in a home purchase, am I going to put 80% of the home EMI or am I going to put 20% of the home EMI?
Right.
And the second part of that will be, how does it affect the psychology of the couple?
Right.
That how does one feel that they still own the 50% of that, even if they might not be paying the 50% of the EMI? And how do you handle these slightly complex emotional
It is extremely complex, and a lot of times people have asked me that am I a therapist, a coach, or a counselor, or a marriage counselor? Right? Which I am not. Clearly, I am not. That requires a very different kind of skill set. All that I am trying to do in my job as a financial advisor is to basically bring out the underlying purpose, right? Underlying the goals, the so-called goal that we see now, buying a house, taking education, XYZ, right? And it will always happen that you will have a lot of goals, and you will just have a lot of goals. I mean, typically, when you ask the person, he will say, okay, I want this, I want this, I want that, right? But it might not be financially feasible. And that is when you have to prioritize, right? And that can only happen if you have a much more detailed discussion with the clients. So, like at least in my work with clients, I ask them to basically complete certain exercises, which kind of spur introspection, right? I mean, there are questions like, what is your earliest money memory? What does money mean to you? Those kind of, you try to bring out that. Because if you don't bring that out, you might end up buying, let's say, that fancy car, but it will not give you that sense of joy or fulfillment that you would actually want, right? So I think for an advisor and also for the couple to actually understand why underlying that becomes very, very important. And to answer your question about the income equality piece, like I said, I mean, I don't know what a therapist would say on this, but I think it will depend up to a large extent on the relationship between the two partners, right? I'm sure when they got to be married, they were aware of this, yes, right? And at some point, they would have also discussed what they would have some sense of notion that, you know, what happens if my partner has a job loss or is laid off, right? I mean, that kind of things can happen. So you might have had that conversation. If not, then the financial date night that I referred to would be a good starting point to actually have this conversation. So yeah, so I think it should not happen that just because someone is earning more and is contributing more becomes the financial parent, so as to speak, right? Then basically you're turning it into from a family structure to a corporate structure, right? That okay, because I'm putting in so much money, I have more votes and more say. So I think that will not lead to a harmonious relationship, because at some point there will be a friction.
Absolutely. I think this is very interesting that you said that with those questionnaires, I'm very sure even both of them would understand their specific roles also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it might also happen that even though, let's say, I'm putting a lot of money into the EMI, but my wife is able to bring a lot more into the planning and the experience planning part. Absolutely. Which is where the real value comes in, the real joy comes in.
Right.
So one can be only a financial contributor, one can be actually a joy partner. So and that is really important. So it is very interesting because those questionnaires will actually help both the parties to understand what their personality is and how can they meaningfully contribute with their strengths.
Correct.
And definitely it's a complementarity, right? Ultimately marriage is about complementarity.
Yeah, it is.
Absolutely.
Right.
So you beautifully mentioned that you ask the couples to actually introspect a lot more. I think the numbers come at the last.
Much later.
Which is very surprising, but which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So we would like to double click on that and understand that what does this introspection mean and how do we do it? What are some of the outcomes that you typically derive from that?
Okay. So see, I think I like to have this entire discovery sessions before I even get to the numbers. I think you would have figured out by now that I've been uncovering the purpose or the why, behind a lot of the things is important. So I think depending on the pace and preference of the client or couple, I can either do it in say 1 or 2 meetings, or if I feel that they are very eager and very participative, right, then it can happen over 3 or 4 meetings. Right? So typically the first meeting is just about throwing them into the water. Trying to kind of give them a sense of flavor of what the questions would be like, right? So you would ask very general questions like, what was your earliest memory of money, right? What described the household, the family that you grew up with, right? Who would feel affected if something were to happen, or who are you responsible for financially? I think kind of it brings forth things that do not come out in a typical backpacking question, and it is important, right? And then alongside this, I try to gauge their, how satisfied they are in their life. So there's this wheel of life exercise that can also be done to gauge their satisfaction level on different aspects of the life. Right? Money is one aspect of the life, right? And there are so many other aspects. So I think this forms as the foundational material, and the couple has been sensitized to think on those lines. I'm pretty sure it does happen that even after the meeting, right? They would continue thinking on these lines. You've kind of sparked the imagination. At the end of this meeting, typically I give them an exercise called the 3 questions, right? Which I use very regularly by George Findra, and I was fortunate enough to be trained by him in my journey to becoming a registered life planner. And so these 3 questions, without getting into the very specifics, the first one essentially talks about what would you do if you had all the money in the world to take care of all the requirements. Not in the future, right? So describe that life. The second question is, you go to your family doctor and he tells you that you have exactly 500 years to live, right? You not feel any sense of pain, but that is the amount of time that you have left. And then the sub question to this would be, what did you miss? What will you do differently? What will you change in your life, right? And if you notice, the first question is about money. The second is now introducing the element of time, that you only have this much time left, right? So it's trying to filter it out, because in the first question typically you will name everything. I want to buy a yacht, I want to travel the world, I want to buy a condo, and all of those things will kind of cover. Moving on, the third question, and which is where I think the most important responses typically come, is that this time the doctor tells you that you have exactly what you do.
So the most important thing comes right out of the
Right.
box.
And the sub question is that what do you miss? What do you regret? Right? And on this point about regret, I would like to mention that very important research has also shown this, that at the end of your life, you don't remember your accomplishments. Right? You remember what you did not get to do, what you regret. I wish I would have done this, right? So that typically tends to bring out the most important elements. And you'll be surprised that it is rarely about money.
Wow.
The two most common responses are, I wish I could spend more time with my family.
Very interesting.
And for couples who have children, so I wish I could see my child growing up, I could spend more time with him, dropping off to school or XYZ, right? Whatever. The second is that I wish I could have done a bit more meaningful work. I think these are typically the two most important things. It's never about buying a BMW. As I've yet to come across them. So I think these are the three questions. I think then I think this kind of, as you understood, is that it is basically narrowed down, right, to your priorities, the key elements of your plan. So the next meeting that I have with clients, right, which I call the Meshi meeting, is where you are trying to make these elements center stage. And you try and paint a picture for the couple and saying that, okay, what if your life were to look like this in the next 2-3 years? How would that feel for you? Right? And you pause there and you just let them. And you will get to see, are they excited about it, about the possibilities? And then, if not, right, you probably have a repeat exercise. So, this is the next meeting. After this meeting, the next meeting they call the obstacles meeting. This is now typically that, okay, this is the life that you want, right? What is actually coming in the way from you achieving that, right?
I see.
It's very easy to just say that it's money, but most of the time it's not only about money, right? So I think that's the obstacle meeting, and by the end of the obstacle meeting, the goal is to narrow down on the specific outcome that you want, at least in the next 1, 2, 3 years, what will happen to you, and subsequent to that, you then start quantifying the impact of those outcomes that you want in terms of hardcore numbers, and see what's possible. Because ultimately, it's always about trade-off. So you do a side-by-side comparison. I think you're a techie, so you would know the A/B testing that you would do, right? So you do those two scenarios. Okay, this is what I want more. Am I willing to let this go, or vice versa, right? So that's also, I think, that is how it is. I'm sorry if I can give you a very, very long answer, but
No, it's really good. I think what I understand especially is that this entire thing is about getting that clarity.
yeah.
Which is, I think, the biggest problem right now.
Yeah.
And that's why people say that are we part of rat race? And it is not about a rat race, but if you have a clarity that why are we running in the rat race, then it is good enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because then you know when to stop maybe.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, most people who keep running and get exhausted, as you rightly said, at the end of the life, and they say, "Yaar, regret ye hai," because they have sometime maybe lost their sight of the clarity.
Yes.
Right? This is what I was wishing for, but unfortunately, I got dragged away. But very beautifully put. I think the detailed answer helps genuinely.
And I think on this point, I think just to paint the picture a bit more for the audience, right? And I don't know if it's appropriate to use the example of a film, but in that movie Tamasha,
Yes.
especially the second half, and I think it really kind of paints the picture for the way most of us go about living our lives, right? So so I think fancy term for this is the hedonic treadmill, right? That you just continue being on that. And there was actually a post on LinkedIn that I shared regarding this very rat race. That who gets to decide that what my definition of success is, what my definition of happiness is.
It has to be very personal.
It has to be very personal. You cannot live your life by someone else's script. Yeah.
No, really great. I think this sheds a very beautiful light on that why and what is important.
Yeah.
And I think once that is figured out, then the how becomes slightly easier part. Definitely. But I think, anyways, for audiences and for me also, now I'm really interested into how, because that will be also very interesting to know. Because even though we, let's say, get to the clarity, the how also becomes very important to get to that point where we are enjoying that part, where we have said that these are our goals. So typically, what is the very high-level framework that you follow or you suggest to follow of getting out of this clarity and moving towards the planning, moving towards the investment, moving towards the goal and that exercise?
Okay. So I think once the, as I said, the outcomes have been kind of identified, we've had the discussion around what is the financial implication of that. and what are the choices that the company is comfortable with. The next stage is basically moving on to implementation, right? So I prepare this one page or 2 page kind of an action plan, right? Okay, that these are the things that we want to do within this time frame, and most importantly, who is going to be accountable for it. I think setting an accountability partner is very, very important because it all gets sounded better. So who's going to check in? That if you said that okay, I want to lose weight and I'm going to go and take a membership, gym membership, right? And you've not done it yet. So who's going to check in? I think that becomes important. And as an advisor, without being intrusive, I would gently nudge, check in on the progress of the plan. And then periodically check in, like you refer to transition between. Life is not linear, right? There would be surprises that will keep on happening along the way. So during those check-ins, we will try to see okay, what has changed. So typically each time I speak to the client, let's say I've had a meeting today and I speak to him after 7, 10, 15 days. One of the most common questions I ask is, what has changed since the last time we spoke? Because you might not be aware of it, right? So I think that becomes very, very important.
No, beautifully said. I think accountability piece is extremely important, especially in couples, because as life goes on, we feel slightly relaxed. We say that we करने वाला था यार, नहीं हुआ क्या हो गया? But I'm very sure this piece, if you put the other person mostly accountable, they will be able to push that, and that is really helpful, I think. But moving on, I think once you decide those accountabilities, I'm very sure you would have come across these things wherein sometimes the priorities for those couples are changing. Okay? One partner may be thinking, as you rightly said, maybe I want to go to gym, but he has some work pressure. Or even in terms of aggression towards anything, okay? One partner is very, very stipulated about time, somebody is not. And I'm very sure that also reflects into the financial nature of the partners, right? So how do you typically suggest them to navigate through these things, wherein their personalities, tying back to the original piece that we talked about, actually comes into the implementation phase? Because that also creates a critical problems of following that path.
Okay. So see, I think that your question is in 2 parts, I think, right? Just helping with the first part, I think completely.
Yeah, so definitely.
The first part was about?
So first part is about, there are different personalities, that couples have. So how do you basically deduce them? First of all, in the what we talked about in the first segment. But how does that impact the how part of it?
Okay.
The implementation part of it, because there will be uncertainties that those personalities will bring. So for example, somebody might be very aggressive about implementing something. Somebody might be slightly relaxed about implementing something. So how do you suggest them to navigate through this?
Okay. So I think again goes back to the same thing, right? I mean, having that communication and open discussion, and I'm assuming that if you refer to one person as being aggressive, the other one is conservative on a relative basis, right? So again, the conservative person should not feel shamed, judged, right? And the same for the aggressive one, right? And you have to understand and appreciate, and more importantly, educate, right? That what is going to be the impact of your having a very aggressive stance vis-a-vis a very conservative stance, right? That needs to be put out there. So in my practice, I normally have this, whenever I'm laying out the investment plan, I do take it through and I focus more on the risk aspects and the inflation aspect, which I call the silent killer, and which is mostly ignored and understated. Coming back to the point about accounting both of these personalities, so I think there is room for both, right? I mean, once you've had this discussion, so say for the shorter term goals, or let's say for a part of the portfolio, so that the conservative partner feels heard, right? You allocate the portfolio on a conservative basis, right? And for the aggressive one, I mean, you take that kind of an approach. In any case, Nikhil, no portfolio is typically 100%. Right? Typically, you will end up diversifying. So by default, the conservative part can be that your debt investments, so right? And so you basically, I think it's important that to avoid flash funds, you make both partners feel heard, right? And also understand the implications of following a particular strategy, right? So that having that conversation upfront, understanding what following an aggressive strategy has done in the past and what they should be prepared for in the future, even though it might not play out exactly, become very important, because when that does happen again, you are better prepared. Absolutely. And the second thing is, obviously, when we are in that meeting wherein we are doing this scenario analysis, etc., right? We do kind of try to factor in That okay, what if suddenly at the end of 1 year the markets were to tank 20%? Where does that leave them? Right? And then you try and show them that okay, but if you stay in this, what is going to happen? And this is like only a temporary fall. So yeah, I think it's basically about addressing the fears, and if you are able to do that, I think that solves the problem.
No, beautifully put. I think what you are saying and what I'm understanding is definitely it boils down to the conversation.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can actually factor in both the personalities,
Yeah.
and you should factor in
You
both
should.
the personalities. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think now moving on to the next phase of how, which is every plan is as good as till you get punched in the face, as famously Muhammad Ali I think said.
Right.
So, but I'm very sure the plan is ready and we both are happy as couple. But there is something called as lifestyle, which keeps on changing, right? Which keeps on every now and then. I want to go for a party. I want to go for Europe. I want to take a break. I want to buy a car. All of those uncertainties or flashy things, even though mentally I don't want to do, but I'm very sure there is slight element of a peer pressure because we are all humans, right? So I want to see that person has taken a car. So how do you typically suggest to factor in these kind of uncertainties, and especially I would say lifestyle choices? Because as we move along, definitely there is aspiration to increase our lifestyle. And how do you typically suggest that when that lifestyle increase should happen? What are the considerations for that lifestyle when you want to upgrade or when you should not upgrade?
Right. So, Nikhil, I think firstly, just to disagree, I think peer pressure is not does not have a little impact; it has a very significant impact.
Okay.
I think it determines a lot of the purchases that we make. To answer your question, lifestyle is inevitable; it will happen, right? I mean, as your income increases, there would be that desire or want to kind of spend extra money on upgrading your lifestyle. You have to decide at what point does it become financially damaging for you, right? I mean, you cannot do that at the cost of your own financial well-being, right? So I think there has to be that balance kind of a trade-off that one needs to do. And at each time, I think in the way I go about, and again, sorry if I'm sounding silly, but I mean that's the only way I know how to explain it, is that you basically assess the impact of that financial decision. So let's say, to give you an example, that okay, someone's salary might have doubled over the course of 2 to 3 years, right, since you first made the plan. Or you might have received a large windfall.
Yes.
Now you have two choices, right? You can buy that flashy new gadget, home, whatever you want to put it. Or you could take that exotic holiday,
Yes.
right? Or you could, save it for the future to build your financial security, achieve financial independence early. So I think that trade-off needs to happen, and you have to understand the impact that okay, what would happen if I were to let's say invest this entire toward the financial independence? That basically, if I do that, I probably will have that option of retiring early, right? And it opens up choices for me. Versus if I spend it sometime, right? Again, the conversation will move back to, and I think you might not like it. I'm repeating the same point, but then that is the fundamental thing, right? And you have to understand why that is important, and the consequence of those choices becomes important, right? The best way to do this would be to kind of probably split it. I mean, have a balancing that okay, if I receive 100 rupees, so say I decide that okay, 50 rupees of the increase is what I will probably use to kind of say upgrade my lifestyle or and the remaining I will basically put away towards my building up secure financial future, right? So yeah, I think that is.
No, definitely. I think.
Sorry. I just want to make one more point. I was trying to remember. So I think I'm also not in the camp, right, that you should live your life only by Excel sheet calculations. I think life is much beyond spreadsheets, and those forecasts have very, very limited purpose. It just kind of gives you a sense. You are planning for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right? All the assumptions that you make will actually not work out or not play out as expected. So what is the point of even kind of obsessing over that? Right? That you achieve that near 99% success rate in that Monte Carlo simulation. I mean, so you cannot, right? I mean, you have to take that leap of faith, and you cannot put off letting it fall later. So I think it's that thing, right? I mean, so that emotional thing is also very, very important. So if it does really make me genuinely happy to buy that Rolex, please go ahead and buy it.
No, you beautifully said it, and I think only an advisor who has gone through so many couples can tell this, because we are also seeing this trend that people think that they have everything mapped out on the Excel sheet, and unfortunately, every day they only follow that Excel sheet or try to follow that Excel sheet, and they lose out on the uncertainty, the beauty of uncertainty in the life.
Yeah.
Very simply put, as you rightly said, if there is a fantastic buffet out there. And if you are always going to think with your partner that अरे वो 500 रुपए का buffet है, I'm going to enjoy it, but does my calculation allow me? It's losing out on the joy. That's very beautifully put. So very nicely, I think that we should have Excel sheet as a reference point.
Yeah.
But it's not a rule book. It's maybe a guideline. One should refer.
Right.
Moving on, I think again going slightly more onto the deeper side where people are interested in करूँ क्या? ज्ञान तो सर समझ गया, करूँ क्या? Right? So in that, what are typically 3 or 4 things as a highlight at least, because I'm very sure there are a lot of more, but in the context of time, what are the 3 most important things as a couple I should think that I'm doing as a mistake, or you would say that you should at least think about it before doing that. What are those 3 things?
Okay. So I think number 1 would be that it is very important for both partners, that is the couple, to show up during financial meetings if they are working with an advisor. And if they are not, then probably take out time every month at least to kind of discuss their finances, because a lot happens in 30 days and you will go through mood swings and you'll go through those phases of anxieties or whatever, right? I mean, something happened at work and that's kind of playing on your mind, right? So just have a open, honest conversation, go for a walk, go to your favorite cafe, right? And just have this kind of a free-flowing conversation. So that becomes, I think, very important. Second, and both partners should be aware of the overall situation. Because I think a slightly different aspect of this is that several times, that is in India, and it's changing, but it's typically one of the persons who is more present in that relationship, who is in charge of managing the financial affairs, right? And fortunately or unfortunately, if something were to happen, right, the other partner might be completely clueless. So the same person for the same family for which the person has been working hard and saving that money might not be able to access it freely. So I think the number 1 thing for me, as far as I'm concerned, would be that make it a joint effort, show up for meetings on a joint basis, either with an advisor or do it amongst yourself. If you can do it, I think maintain a journal. I think that would really help, because then you can go back and refer to what we spoke about in the class. And following on this, I think in the subsequent meeting, what to do is that you can just check that this is what we thought that we wanted to do, right? To follow up and check the progress on that, and celebrate your win. So I mean, you receive a bonus and you knocked off 10 lakh rupees from your home was principal, right? So celebrate that and open a bottle of champagne and enjoy that, right? So you should need to celebrate that. It's not only about money all the time. I think that's important, right? So I think that's the number 1 thing. The second thing is to have a very well articulated vision for the life going forward. हमारे मन में होता है, we have this thing in our head, अच्छा ये करना है, and we tend to assume that the other person also knows, right? So I think वो अगर साथ में बात होगी तो I think that thing will come out. So I think articulate it, write it down if you have to, right? I mean, make it, बात करते vision board की, right? Make it a vision board and put it in front of you, right? So I think that is that's something that people should do. It would probably help. And I think lastly here, I mean, whenever you are having any kind of a thought or an anxiety or a just talk it out. I think that is the best medicine, right? I mean, beyond all the technicalities.
I think beautifully you said, because as a couple, I can still remember my 7 years of marriage that these are some of the mistakes that I think haven't happened, and especially the second one, wherein there is a plan. Everybody thinks that ये तो पता ही होगा, and सामने वाला से कब बताया, मतलब you did not say this out loud. So it is very important, I think, that you should say it out loud. You should respect that the सामने वाला person also has that right to say it out loud.
Absolutely.
And once that is out loud, once that is on the paper, then it makes more sense to get aligned, because it becomes easier also as a couple to get aligned to something which is on the paper. No, definitely, I think. Slightly different angle, but whenever we are doing this exercise especially, I'm very sure couples, as you also pointed out, go through life events.
Mhm.
The worst event, unfortunately, is death of a spouse,
Mhm.
right? And even the data suggests that India, I think, has the largest unclaimed policies in India. And the reason for that is this only, that either there was no transparency, that the spouse did not know, and it can be either party. It does not have to be always. But whenever this kind of a thing happens, I'm very sure you as a financial advisor actually would be coming as a custodian,
Right.
and would be also educating the spouse, navigating them.
Mhm.
Because in those harder times, they actually need someone heavily trustworthy, because they're already going through a lot of pain. So, how has been your experience about that, and what are the typical things that you would advise the couples today to plan for such uncertain event? Definitely.
Okay. So I think in the aftermath of COVID, there was this tool that became very common and popular and easily accessible. What my family should know. So you had this 30, 40 page kind of an Excel sheet or a Word document, whatever format, listing out everything. Right? So I think that can be a good starting point. In your own way, in your own format, whatever are the details that you feel are important to be shared. Right? Again, this can be covered during those conversations. Financial data, but this is where my money is. This is the person that you need to speak to regarding mutual funds. This is the person you need to speak to regarding insurance, so on and so forth. Right? So I think that becomes important. I think that in itself will solve most of the problems, right? And nowadays you have a lot of these portals available which can actually aggregate all your financial information in a single. I think use one of those apps. I think that should also help. So again, I mean, you have to have the conversation, maintain that transparency, explain to the other partner, right, that what to do in my absence. And then you can make it more fancy with a letter of wishes and all of those things. I'm not getting to that right now, but I mean, yes, so essentially the basic thing is that tell your partner where the money is or how to deal with stuff after I'm gone.
I think overall in this entire conversation, what I'm concluding or what I'm coming to a conclusion is you have to have this conversation.
Yeah.
And if I have to tell one thing to our audience is that book your date night. Immediately go book your financial date night, and at least make sure that these details are transparent, wherein if something bad happens, and that is a good starting point, wherein you are at least happy to share all your money, at least information about the money with your partner, and that's a fantastic start of this relationship. At least.
But just one more point I want to make is that you mentioned about this transition, right? And it could be various things. I think it becomes very, very important when you are going through transition. From an advisor point of view and both from a client point of view, that don't try to make any significant decisions during that phase. Because your mind would be overcrowded with, I mean, if it's, let's say, the loss of a partner or something like that, so on. Your mind will be crowded with a different kind of emotion. You will not be in the best position to make a proper decision, right? So unless it's very, very urgent, put it off for later. The world is not going to come to an end, right? And things are not going to change. So yeah, I think that is one thing that one should be doing.
No, it's absolutely. I think you just carried me towards the next thing that I just wanted to ask as a final thought.
Yes.
Which was, what is that one thing that you would say that when, and very rightly said, when a couple, like us also, I'm 36, I'm 33, and when should a couple like us actually look out for a good financial advisor? And is there some criteria that you have, or the people like you have, definitely? Should we even say that we are fit as an archetype into this, or we are yet to be, or should I be maybe 2 years earlier? Okay. What's your advice on that, and how should we look at it? How should we find it? Okay, and what should be our frame of reference to finding the right advisor?
Okay. So see, I think if you feel that there's a lot of friction that's happening, right? If you're having these unwanted kind of squabbles and quarrels, right? If there are anxieties and concerns around money or otherwise, that both the partners are not being able to kind of come to a conclusion or are not being able to resolve, right? That would be a good place, starting place to kind of think of engaging with the advisor. In terms of from the couple's perspective on how to kind of identify such a person, I think, and this is again probably relevant for both couples and individuals seeking advice. There has to be a practice of interviewing financial advisors before you actually kind of work with them.
Okay.
you are entrusting your life savings in them, and you are trusting that that is going to shape your financial life, right, for the next 30, 40, 50 years. So understanding if there is an alignment in the values, right, and if that advisor is a good fit, if you feel that you can have a good conversation with him, I mean, does he give you the kind of space to kind of express yourself, or does he kind of force you around another, put the value in this, right? So I think I think that becomes important beyond the obvious ones like checking for registration, how qualified is he, and all that.
No, beautifully put. I think the point that you made about having the value match seems extremely important. And the openness that you showed that actually the couple should interview the advisor rather than it's a reverse way. Actually, it's liberating thought because that makes life easier also and gives a choice also. Because definitely, as you said, he is going to be maybe a partner, equal partner, be more
the stakeholder.
Yeah, he's a stakeholder into your life along with your spouses, and that's a beautifully thing, I think. We have had a fantastic conversation, and I personally have enjoyed it a lot. I can assure you, I'm going to go and have a financial date night this Sunday for sure. Okay. So at least that is one takeaway that I have taken it from it. But any parting thoughts or any last piece of advice that you think you might have missed in this conversation? Of course, we have gotten that communication is the key. Clarity is the, I would say, biggest unlocker of your everything. Happiness, I would say. And finally, is getting the right advisor aligned with your values, where you feel comfortable, actually unlocks the entire wealth magic for you. That has been the summary for me. Anything as a parting thought that you have?
I think this is one. I think we tend to, when we talk about assets and wealth, and we only talk about in monetary terms. I personally feel that time is a much bigger asset. Right? It's a much more scarce asset. I mean, you might lose money and still probably get it back, but you cannot turn back time. Right? So I think that's very important. And so don't put off living for later. Start with why. I hope Simon Sinek does not sue me, but start with the why. And try to understand, just be more mindful, more present, and introspect before you're making decisions. I think that itself will kind of solve a lot of
I think fantastic end. We have spent so much time, but definitely time is very important. And fantastically put, I think, for all the audiences, yes, time is extremely important. And the beauty will be that with that time, how much can they live? Depends a lot on their financial decisions also in today's day and age. But definitely that's not the most important time. Live your life. Yes, finances are important.
Yes.
Make sure that they are important. Even a due importance. But it was.
I'm not for a moment saying that money is not important.
Yes.
But I said that we give. हम हमेशा बोलते हैं कि हम कल कर लेंगे. अच्छा ये हम बाद में कर लेंगे. Right? So I think just see if it's possible and just go ahead and do it.
Do it. Yeah,
I mean, like I said, I mean in the at the end of the third question is about I wish I could have seen my child grow up or spend more time with family. That does not require money, right?
Yes.
It's about taking like 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, whatever that amount of time is.
Yeah.
Offer, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And something that you can do today. Yes. कल करे सो आज कर, आज करे सो अब. Fabulous, Rahul. It has been a privilege to talk to you.
My pleasure.
And definitely, we hope that there will be a lot of our audiences who will get value, insights from this conversation. And thanks a lot once again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for watching this on Spring Money's channel. For more honest money conversations, do follow us, do subscribe us, and definitely put any questions that you have about which we can ask to our esteemed guests into the comments. Thanks a lot. We'll see you soon.